Look at my seats.
Good afternoon. Thank you again for being here at the USC Sports and the LGBT Experience Conference. For those of you who this is your first session, my name is Amel Rogers. I'm one of the co-directors along with Evan Brody, a doctoral candidate here at Amherst. And we are extraordinarily excited for this particular panel because the goal of the entire conference is to bring together scholars and athletes and media practitioners, etc., to analyze this intersection. And we figured that it would be a missed opportunity, being at a school with an extraordinary sports tradition, to not include the collegiate experience into that. So we wanted to see what USC is doing to make safe spaces for LGBT athletes, as well as the NCAA in general. And we have the best possible moderator for this. We have Pat Griffin, who, if you've been here yesterday or today, you've heard a lot about. She's the Professor Emerita in Social Justice Education at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where her research and writing interests were LGBT issues in education and athletics. She's been an advocate for LGBT equality for over 30 years, and she's the founding director of Changing the Game, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network Sports Project. She basically is the best bridge between the scholarship world and the practitioner world. And specifically, she's worked with the NCAA on a lot of issues in collegiate athletics. And so that's why she's here today. And please welcome Pat Griffin.
Coming. I did feel cool air coming in.
Yes,
so
I apologize. We are working on it, and we turned down the lights and opened a door, and we're doing our best.
Great. How many people here are athletes? Great. Are there coaches? Okay.
Raise it high, Evan.
There you go. Okay, great. All right. Sports fans. All right. Any Red Sox fans?
Yes.
I just thought I'd check.
Sore subject.
Sorry about that. I'm a huge Red Sox fan, so I'm very excited. Thank you for coming to this panel, focusing on LGBT issues in colleges and universities. It's been an amazing couple of years looking at LGBT issues and collegiate issues in the collegiate setting. There has been more progress, I think, over the last probably 3 years than in the previous 20, probably. It's like it's an issue whose time has come. It's on the table in collegiate athletics, and we're really, I think, starting to see some change. And somewhat surprisingly to many people, a lot of that change is being led by the NCAA, which is not necessarily perceived, I think, widely as a typically progressive, sports governing organization. But they have done some real good work in terms of creating resources for colleges. The most recent one is called Champions of Respect, which is available on ncaa.com, which is a specific guide for coaches, administrators, student athletes about creating inclusive and respectful places on college campuses for people of all sexual orientations and gender identities. In addition to that, they've made some very concrete and I think useful recommendations to all NCAA member institutions on how to include transgender athletes on sports teams with best policies and practices to back up an overall policy for inclusion, which is huge. And in addition to that, they've sort of converted an annual conference which used to focus just on Title IX to, they call it an inclusion summit. And they basically address 4 issues of inclusion at that summit. They address disability, race, gender, and LGBT issues. And in fact, at that conference last spring, there were so many of us there who are active in the LGBT sports advocacy world that we were calling one day at the conference Gay Day at the NCAA, because they had so much good programming devoted to LGBT issues in college sports. So, this panel is sort of happening in a context of big change. In addition to that, there are numerous advocacy organizations that are springing up around the country that are providing resources and speakers and workshops and educational opportunities to college student athletes and coaches and administrators. Athlete Ally, You Can Play, Stand Up Foundation, Break the Silence, Go Athletes. I mean, I could go on and on about these resources that never used to be there. There used to be a few voices in the wilderness, speaking out. I was one of them for a long time. And now there's lots of company, lots of great people doing good work. And so it's an exciting time to be a part of this conversation. So we have 4 panelists. And what I'd like to do first is just let each of them introduce themselves briefly. I've got some questions to pose to them, and then we'll open it up and invite you to ask questions of the panel. Sound like a plan? All right. Take it away.
My name's Donna Heinel, and I am a Senior Associate Athletic Director. I have the title of Senior Women's Administrator here at the University of Southern California. I'm originally from Philadelphia. I'm an East Coast girl. I spent some time at University of Massachusetts. I have a business background and have been at my current position. I've been at USC for about 10 years, at my current position for 3. I have a partner. I have 2 children, 4 and 6 years old, and they're the love of my life, and I think I have the best job in the world. So.
I'm Lonnie Lawrence. I'm a clinical sports psychologist here at USC. I'm also from the East Coast, Boston. I played basketball at a small D1 school called Northeastern. I had the privilege of playing overseas for a bit in the Netherlands. Came back, got my master's at BU in sports psych, got my clinical psych degree at University of Denver, where I focused on issues of diversity, mostly racial and sexual orientation, a little bit in transgender issues. I've been here at USC for 3 years. At first as a pre-doc intern, last year as a postdoc, and then this is actually my first year as a clinical sports psychologist. Feel really privileged to be able to work in this environment and have opportunities to talk on panels like this.
Cool. I'm Kirk Walker, and I'm currently the assistant softball coach at UCLA. Sorry. And I'm going back in my first year now as an assistant, but I spent the previous 20 years as the head coach at Oregon State University. 8 years ago, I came out as one of the first out coaches in the country, Division I coaches in the country. And that was kind of all came about because I was going through an adoption process and have a 7-year-old daughter who is the love of my life as well. And kids definitely change things. But this was an opportunity for me to come back home, to not only professionally to UCLA, but to come back to LA where my family is and help raise my daughter down here with my partner. I've gotten very involved with Pat and several others with the LGBT Sports Coalition that we formulated 2 years ago, and have some great opportunity to connect and work with Nike. My relationship with Nike was very, very strong, and I was able to connect Sid with Nike to kind of get them going. And the Be True program that's going on now with Nike has raised just recently $200,000 that they've donated to the LGBT Sports Coalition for grants and funding for projects, primarily K through 12, college, and even potentially in the pro ranks as well. So I'm excited to be here. First time really on campus because they don't have a softball program here. So my time has never really been on campus around SC. So excited to be here.
Hello, my name is Sean Mulroy. I am a senior here, and I'm a member of the men's swim team. I'm finishing up my degree in economics and finance. I have also been very involved with, throughout the past 4 years, with the LGBT Resource Center here at USC, which has been, I think, a great resource for all of us students here at SC as well as the athletes here. And last year I wrote a story, not really a story, just a narrative about my life here at USC and about how it's been, quite frank, just fantastic, and how everyone here has been very open and accepting of me as a gay athlete.
Great, so that's our panel. And I also just want to say before I ask some questions is that panels are great and people get to talk from their own personal experience, but panels are always limited by who's not on the panel. And I just think it's important to acknowledge that we don't have any current lesbian coaches or athletes on the panel. We don't have any transgender athletes or coaches on the panel. We don't have any current athletes of color on the panel who identify as either allies or LGBT. So with that, you know, I just think it's important to acknowledge that. And it would probably be good if you could think symbolically that the empty chairs here, if we were really going to be more comprehensive in talking about this topic, they would be filled with those people, but they're not. And maybe we can talk about that too, about what's up with that. Okay, all right, my first question, panel, you know, anybody answer. What's the big deal with this? In the session yesterday morning, someone asked a question that was sort of like, well, you know, I don't understand why you have to come out, basically. You know, straight people don't come out. I mean, what's the big deal? Why can't athletes who identify as LGBT just play their sport? You know, what are the consequences and what are the benefits of either not being out or being out? Your first question.
Well, I'll jump in. I'm very passionate about this particular topic, and I think the one comment that I always have coming back is, as long as there are kids that are killing themselves and people that are hiding their sexuality and fear their sexuality being found out, it's important for LGBT people to come out publicly and visually. When we get to that point where those things are not happening and no one is growing up fearing to be discovered, then it really shouldn't be anyone's business and it doesn't really matter. But we're not there. And that's just the flat truth. So those questions are not necessarily wrong. It isn't really important. But yet, when you put it in the construct of what still exists out there today, it is extremely important at this day and age. To me, I think being able to have a visible role model, potential mentor, that can help a young athlete at any age realize that they are not alone in the world of sport is very, very powerful.
I also would, to add on to that, this notion that straight people don't come out. I think straight people come out all the time. Whether or not you're introducing your boyfriend or girlfriend, the pictures that you have in your office, the way that you talk about yourself, straight people are coming out all the time. And the fact that a lot of student athletes feel like they don't have the same type of privilege to talk about their identity, I think that's where depression, loneliness, some of the things that you see with student athletes not being able to express themselves, that becomes an issue. So I don't really think it's a question of why do these student athletes, why do they need to come out? It's just that everybody else is, and they're being forced to kind of cover that up themselves.
Anyone else want to take it? Okay. All right. Let me ask for the panelists who identify as gay or lesbian. I don't know. I don't think we have a bi person on the panel either. So I'm open to, if I'm wrong about that, please speak up. But can you talk a little bit about your experiences as lesbian athletes, coaches, lesbian and gay athletes and coaches?
I think I'll take that one. So far here at USC, I think my sport's a little bit different in the sense that it's very selfish. My times are not necessarily contingent upon someone else's times. I don't have to worry about someone passing me a ball or you know, someone blocking for me. So my success is really contingent upon myself. So I don't think that, I think individualistic sports have a little bit an easier time with the coming out process and being a gay athlete. Which kind of goes back to the last topic of why are people afraid to come out. I think that they show hesitance because of, you know, how they feel that their teammates are going to react and treat them differently. Here at USC, there's a handful of gay athletes. I'm not nearly the only one. And I think that for the most part, we've had a great experience. I think, you know, there's ups and downs with athletics. It's a crazy roller coaster of emotion. But USC has been one of the most accepting places to be an out athlete, I think, in the nation. I can't speak for other athletes, and I'm sure it's more difficult elsewhere. I took a recruiting trip to Auburn, and I don't think that would have been the place for me. But I think, you know, everything for me has gone great. I have great teammates. I have great coaches who are very accepting. I have great administration. I have great support here. So, I have nothing poor to say about my experience.
For me, it was interesting, obviously. When I first came out, I came out because I was going through the adoption process with my daughter, so I wasn't trying to make a statement about anything other than it was going to become public knowledge, so I just wanted it to be out there for my team to know. But I got tons of interview requests and media requests, and I look back at that and I was really disappointed in myself because I kept saying I don't want to be known as the gay coach, I want to be known for my record, and I was really adamant about that. And what I realized was that I was doing that in defense of I didn't want to be labeled, but at the same time, I don't know why I was so fearful of that label. To me, I actually own that label now, and will be glad when I don't have to say I'm one of the only ones. But for right now, I am, and that's fine, and can be known as that. But along that way, through that whole process, I never had anything from a peer, from an administrator, from another university, ever be negative. I had no negative recruiting going against me that I'm aware of. I had no recruit that I lost. No parent that I was recruiting on campus ever showed any signs of hesitancy or concern when it would come about on a visit. So I really have to say that obviously I'm a male coaching female, so in some ways I became safer. But right or wrong. But I would have to say that I think most of my concerns were all in my head, and my fears were all in my head. And that reality has proven that my experience has been fantastic. And if anything, I've gotten more support from other peers and coaches that have been supportive, mainly from my straight peers. The most kickback I've gotten has been from the lesbians that are coaching, to be honest with you. Saying, why are you speaking out? Don't rock the boat. The world's good right now. So most of the negative I've gotten has been from internally saying, we don't want to have this discussion, which I think is troubling.
From my experience, I was just talking about this before we met. If I'm dressed up kind of girly with makeup on, I always get the question, do you play volleyball? And if I'm wearing like my sweats and my hoodie, like, oh, you play basketball. I think people sometimes have a hard time reading me as lesbian. And so one of the things that happens is that I continually have to come out again and again. It's not just this one big time that there's a notice kind of sent, an email.
Right, everyone got the text.
But that I kind of have to the point where I forget that I need to kind of talk about that aspect of my identity. I think that was hard in college, though. Kind of, I got the sense of being, having like a hidden minority. That because I don't have my hair really short, or that I don't have a maybe feminist, black-looking appearance, that people didn't read me a certain way, which I think could be both good and bad. I can blend in pretty easily. But I think a lot of my struggle coming out as gay in college was really internal and very lonely, and feeling disconnected with teammates. Here I would have to echo what Sean says. I don't know as an athlete, but I do know as an administrator, feeling quite comfortable with my identity and never having to second guess who I am, feeling pretty supportive in terms of some of the work that we're doing, and something that you said before too, that I think the timing of me being here at USC and being able to work with Donna and other people on LGBT topics is that it's a lot more open and encouraged. So it's been great for me to be very comfortable with my identity and also be here at a time where a lot of work can be done, which is good.
I'm 52, so during the time period that I was in high school was a little bit a different time period. I knew I was gay from a very, very young time period when I was very young. And so I think as an athlete, I just found my little niche. I knew that there were I went to Springfield College, and so I knew there was other gay people, and you kind of find your little niche, and nothing is really expressed openly, but you always would meet on Friday or Saturday nights on the back door with the special knock, and you would go into a bar, and there would be all other people in there. You know, I kind of took my cues. I came out to my parents, you know, and I'm pretty kind of bold. If they didn't like it, you know, screw them. Is really kind of was my kind of mantra to that. And you know, for about 2.5 years, I didn't have a relationship with my family until my sister got cancer. Then I kind of went back into that. So so I just kind of I've been a loner for mostly all of my life, because from that early on and that reaction from my parents, I just kind of been, you know, someone that just, I do what I want to do when I want to do it. Then I got into coaching, and I coached swimming. So to walk into a locker room with a bunch of naked women as a lesbian was a pretty, you know, pretty treacherous place to walk. And I can always remember, don't look up, don't look at the women, keep your head down, you know, all that. Now, they knew I was gay, so I don't know exactly what they thought, because we were never really talked about it. But I can specifically remember just, you know, keep my head down, don't look, don't give anybody, you know, anything to say regarding your sexuality and inappropriateness. So that's kind of where I was. And then as an administrator, you know, we've made incredible strides in the last 3 years, because, you know, with Pat taking over, we acknowledge actually the existence of gay and lesbian student athletes are actually here on our campus, alive and well. And before that, we didn't have that. We would try different ways, and I know I have a colleague in the audience that was here during that time, of different ways to maneuver the back doorway to get up, and I just felt it was absolutely ridiculous. Here we are in the, you know, 2000, I've been here for 10 years, 2006, and I can't get, you know, any movement on the gay and lesbian issues. So ever since Pat took over, it's much more open. We're still making strides here as administration. And, you know, it's everyone pretty, you know, I have a couple of swimmers in the back there that, I mean, they know that I'm gay. I don't cover that up at all right now, because I don't feel I need to. You know, when I was an administrator before, when the previous administration was here, I took my cues from the SWA that was in charge, and that was Lisa Love. And Lisa Love did not say anything about anything. She went to Arizona State and was out at Arizona State, and I guess that was great for Arizona State. But while we were here, you know, we knew we had an ally, but she wasn't really waving the flag or anything. So that's kind of where I took my cues from as far as my role model. But now my role model is Pat Hayden, who is just all about support and all about student athlete welfare. And it's great to be able to have a gay and lesbian task force, and being able to produce a film, you know, our version of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and be able to administer programming and administer surveys with our student athletes to tell what kind of environment is within the locker room, and what kind of environment is with between teams and among team members. So it's very, I think, important that you have a leader that kind of sets the tone.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. I think that is a huge message that I just would like to note, you know, and sort of reinforce that this is the leadership, the athletic leadership, the campus leadership. You know, at every stage, it's important to have people. And one of the things that I like to talk about when I work with administrators and coaches is, because I find that times have changed enough now, so a lot of people have good intentions. If you ask them, yes, I want all of our athletes to feel safe and included, regardless of their sexual orientation and gender identity. But there's often a gap between that intention and what's actually happening on the campus to make that happen, in terms of visibility of the leadership, policies, practices that really sort of back up that good intention. So the next question I wanted to ask is, Well, first of all, how do LGBT issues come up on campus in athletics? And sort of the part two is what we have two schools represented. What are your schools doing in athletics to create that atmosphere of respect and inclusion?
Well, I'll jump in
There you
to
go.
represent UCLA because we've heard some great things about what USC is doing, and it's fantastic. We have an administrator here who actually, that she was talking about, that was here and now at UCLA, who really took upon it this year to really step up and create an allies group within the athletic department. And she obviously, I was already out, so it was very easy for her to ask me to be on it. And she's done some amazing work with campus, and it was tying in the resources of campus, athletics, the LGBT Resource Center, and creating and the rec department actually is another big component of that, because I think rec sports oftentimes are that missing stepchild when you talk about athletics. So you have intercollegiate athletics that everybody sees every day in the newspaper, but you have rec sports, which a majority of your campus are partaking in. And our ability to tie those two together with some of the work and the speakers that we had and the conferences we had were really powerful. And we had some great responses and tremendous numbers of participants coming to that conference last April. And it was not a mandatory event for student athletes. It was open, and we had well over 800 participants in it. And the interesting thing was, not to digress a little bit, but literally in that room of people that were there voluntarily, when asked who in the audience knew or had a family member that was LGBT, literally it would have been 99.9% of the hands were up. And then when you asked how many had a teammate at some point in time in their athletic careers that was identified LGBT, almost half the room raised their hands. And to start to realize that this is just an unspoken issue, no one's talking about it, but literally everybody knows we exist. Everyone knows we're there, but it's not really talked about. And that was powerful to me, to start saying, let's create some resources, let's create an avenue to be able to start talking about it in a healthy way, so that we're not leaving somebody with a hidden identity. Let's let them know it's okay to talk about it and find out. So it's a process. We have not a lot that are out of athletes at UCLA right now. Mm-hmm. We have certainly a handful that are there, but not that are out yet. So I think it's an interesting time, but I know that we're trying to create a definitely very welcoming and supportive environment in our department and on campus.
Sean?
USC, we've actually, Lonnie and Donna and I had a meeting yesterday. All the administration here has gone through Lonnie's ally training, which I think has been great. And we were talking about bringing that to all the teams on campus. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's do it. Let's sign everyone up. Put it in the books. And Lonnie was like, well, hold on one second. Like, it's not that easy. So we're just kind of getting everyone on board with that. In addition to that, I've been working with the LGBT Resource Center here. I've actually started a discussion group on campus in conjunction with the Resource Center, basically for varsity, intramural, club athletics here on campus. Basically anyone who identifies as an athlete who would be LGBTQ questioning, they could come. It's once a month, and we just started up, so things are going a little bit slow, but that I hope will turn into a valuable resource for everyone on campus. And I know that Lonnie has a bunch of programs that you do.
A little bit of background for me. When I was at school, we had a sports psychologist. In sports psychology, I went to school between 1997 to 2002. And sports psychology was pretty new, and a lot of my teammates who were struggling with their identity would go to talk to this older straight guy, and he didn't quite get it. And for me, being on the team, I didn't really feel like I connected with him. Like, if I was going to talk about, I think I have a crush on my girlfriend, like, he wasn't the picture of who I wanted to talk to. And so that's what kind of sparked my interest in sports psych. Like, this was someone who could have been a huge asset on my team, and it kind of fell flat. And so my interest has always been how to better support student athletes and better understanding their identity. So when I came here to USC, I was trying to look for ways to kind of connect my passion with sports psych and do a lot more stuff within the LGBT Center. And Dr. Robin Schofield, who's the head sports psychologist here, would tell me about the times before Pat Hayden was here, how they would try to send out emails to some of the student athletes that if you wanted to, participate in the LGBT center, like please come, but they didn't want to send out the email because that would offend the straight students, and we don't even need to worry about that because we're Iran, there's no gay students here, and I couldn't believe that this was only maybe 6 years ago. But with the new administration here, we've been continually trying to figure out ways to best support our student athletes. I was very inspired by UCLA and what they've done with the symposium that they put together, and I was able to attend, and we were trying to brainstorm ways of how to best support student athletes. And the first thing we thought of, especially being psych-mind, is we should create a support group. But that idea didn't really seem to fit because if students didn't know that the administration was very open and comfortable with terms and ideas related to LGBT, like why would they go to an athletic-sponsored support group? It didn't seem to fit.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And so we started to think of how can we show student athletes that not only is the administration supportive, but they're inclusive and that we want to promote this. And the thing that we came up was doing ally training. And so we first asked for volunteers, departments who wanted to do ally training. Athletic training immediately jumped on board. Student athlete academic services went next, and then I think strength training got trained as well. And so we got our big groups covered, and then we realized, so we have the administrators, what about the coaches? And then I was fortunate enough to go to the head coaches retreat and do an ally training with the head coaches. And what was amazing to me were the group of coaches that came up, and basically the ally training, the first thing was doing definitions, like defining what lesbian is, gay, what does homosexual mean, why is that a negative connotation now? Like very basic, simple language, and coaches coming up to me being like, I never knew these definitions. They had never heard these terms before. They had never thought of these concepts, and it completely blew my mind the difference between the two generations, that we have these students who are coming out and very open, and then you have these coaches who have no idea what their players are even talking about, or even how to have a conversation with them, or what to do if an athlete does come out, what's appropriate, what should they not say, what happens if there's a conflict. The other good thing that was great was that the coaches all said that there's never been they would ask questions like, what if somebody doesn't want to stay in the same room with somebody else in the hotel room? And they'd be quick to say, this has never been asked, I've never had this issue, but just in case, I just want to know. So the head coaches were wonderful and really engaged. And then through that, we realized that we need to, as an athletic department, show how inclusive we are. And we've seen UCLA, we've seen Cal, we've seen Stanford create these You Can Play videos, but ours is not on YouTube. And so it's been this year that we've decided that we want to make a production to showcase how inclusive, how open USC is, and we're now pulling together a film to be produced. So it's been great for me to go through each of these processes and seeing the athletic department. There's a pledge that is in McKay that really holds on to the values of diversity and inclusivity, and that we're really trying to showcase that right now.
We actually, for the first time, if this is how, I think, when did you come into
2010.
2010. When did you come into the head coaches meeting? Was that last year?
We were still in Heritage, so I think that might have been 2012.
Yeah, 2000.
Yeah,
We had
in the fall.
Every month we have a head coaches meeting.
Yeah.
So we sit around, and so Lonnie, Robin, and I said, well, you know what? We're going to bring in a bunch of gay student athletes. They can't deny it if they're sitting right in front of them. And so a lot of the Sean, George, a couple other people came in, and the way that it's funny the way we had to present it, because they talked, they stood up and they talked, and what we talked about is how if I'm open and I come out to my coach, how that creates a great environment and I perform better. Because coaches are all about performance. So that's the kind of the way that we kind of broke into it with the head coaches. And then at the head coaches retreat, it was kind of funny. I just laugh at this stuff. But so we gave them all the definitions.
Yeah.
And so we made all the coaches, we went around the table of the coaches, and we all made them read as we were, checking to see if the coaches did the correct names and definitions. We made them read it. Well, that was homosexuality. And we're all like, we were laughing, but we made them talk about it. We made them hear their own voice talking about it. So that was kind of good. So I share that with you.
You know what I love about what you're saying about how SC and UCLA has approached this is that I think there are a lot of schools around the country that have sort of jumped on the You Can Play video bandwagon. They make a wonderful video. Or they'll have people sign ally pledges, which are great. I think those are wonderful ways to sort of make a kind of a commitment. But you have to go beyond that. And it sounds like what's happened at both of your schools is that you've backed up sort of that commitment of a video. And in fact, in some ways, you've done the stuff. You've had the programs, made the policies, you're working on it, and then you make the video, which is really the way it should happen, because then there's something that's tangible in terms of real change, in terms of policies and practices, and educating coaches that makes the video really mean something other than just an intention. So I love that. And so kudos to SC and UCLA for doing that.
One funny story that I want to share about the You Can Play video was Christina had gone into Coach Moore's office and said, we're doing this video and we'd like, would you be willing to? And, she wasn't really sure exactly how it was going to take, although she felt pretty confident. And his excitement for doing the video and being on the video was rather interesting because he was so concerned. She's describing, and I probably should just let her describe it, but he was arranging things in the back that was going to be on camera, and how did it look, and he was so concerned about this You Can Play video because he wanted to make sure it came across right, and they had the right tone, and he didn't want to be too serious, and he wanted to be welcoming, and it was really kind of interesting. And it turns out at the time he ended up being the first BCS Division I football coach to make that public statement, which as soon as it came out, we discovered, and he discovered because it was tweeted everywhere. But it was very cool to see a coach of that stature being so excited about how he would be presented. Not that he'll go through with it and I'll do it. I'll say you can play, and cut it off. He really wanted to be presented in a way that he felt was really inclusive. It was a very cool thing, and I think a big part of that video, and Christina for getting that done was amazing. So it was funny.
That's a great story. And it kind of leads into the next question that I wanted to ask, is that we've talked a lot about allies. And just so everyone knows, when we talk about an ally, we're talking about someone who identifies as straight, but who believes that it's important to create an inclusive and respectful environment for people who identify as LGBTQ. And every social justice movement has to have the involvement of allies, whether we're talking about the fight against racism, we need white allies. We're talking about sexism, fight against sexism, we need male allies. And so heterosexual allies are a very important part of change. And what I wanted to ask you now is to say a little bit about your experiences with allies on your campus, and if you could offer up maybe something that an ally has done in particular that was really meaningful and helpful to you.
I can kind of run with that one. Earlier this year, I participated in an open water swim for the Gay and Lesbian Center of Los Angeles. And I asked all my teammates, I was like, hey guys, I'm doing this open water swim on Saturday. Everyone's welcome to come swim in. It's only a 2K. You get to miss Saturday practice. So I'm sure I got a few people just for that reason. But I got 3 of my my guy teammates, to come out and do the open water swim with me. The 2 people who basically tied for first were 2 straight teammates of mine, and we're really happy to be part of it. My one teammate still wears the Gay and Lesbian Center cap in practice every day. But other than that, I just have had really great teammates, as well as other athletes on campus who are always, willing to, stick up for what's right in their opinions, and I'm very appreciative of that.
I know for me, the Coach Moore story is a great one on the UCLA campus, but I want to go back to when I was at Oregon State, because that's really kind of when I allies became a little bit more apparent to me. And for me, I don't know that there was one particular event, but I would say the head coach, football coach there, Mike Riley, is a good friend of mine. And then the coaches that I coached with on the national team were all male. So it was Mike Candrea, Hall of Fame coach, and John Rittman from Stanford. And it was right after I got done with the national team and the Olympic coaching staff that I came out, and I thought, I know their families. I've known them for a long time. I'm close with them. I'm like, it'll be interesting to see what comes of it. Well, I never got a direct conversation of, you're great and this is fantastic. But it was the fact that it didn't change the relationship was very powerful to me, because they're not two people that really talk about their feelings anyways. So it would have been very awkward for them to do that. But what they showed me was immediately just showing me the support and not changing that relationship and being very supportive. I get a great job, and that was powerful. And I think it also showed to the people around them that relationship didn't change, and they went out of their way to make sure that they understood. They didn't shy away from me at the conventions or whatever because I had come out. And I thought that was as powerful as anything verbal that was said. So I think allies come in different forms. I think they can be vocal, they can be visible by wearing things, but they can also, in their actions, be very, very powerful.
I have a quick story. At the coaches retreat, we showed some of the other Pac-12 You Can Play videos, and after it was all done, and I don't think I had yet talked to Donna or Pat with the idea of creating a USC one. I was sitting down at the table, gathering all my materials afterwards, and Pat Hayden comes up to me and he's like, "We're doing a video. It's going to be better than all those." And I'm like, okay. But I do think, kind of going back to what Donna was saying, that if you don't have support from the top administrators, it's really hard to do anything else.
Yeah, I think for me, as far as ally, is when Pat came on board, I think basically August 1st or beginning part of August, about 3 years ago. And within, we were heading to Hawaii. So the first time I met him, he said, "I want you and your partner to come on the plane to Hawaii football game." At that particular time, I had 2 children. One was 3 and the other one was just a little over 1. And I hadn't even been acknowledged of having 2 children. So the fact that he just said that to me made me know that everything was going to be okay. And then for my support staff around me, is they threw me a shower for my children, because you're kind of I didn't actually have the children. My partner is 10 years younger than me. So, we always had showers for her because she's having the kids. Well, what do you do for the woman that's not the man, but the woman that's not having the kids? How do you do that? So they kind of made it up, and they gave it to me, and we had a shower. So it was great. And 2 weeks ago, we had a shower for Isaac, whose wife is having the baby, but you don't do anything for the guy. So we had a shower for the guy. So it was those were 2 things that kind of hit home for me.
That's great. Okay, something that you just briefly alluded to, Kirk, I wanted to follow up on, and that is looking at the different ways that homophobia sometimes is manifested in men's sports and women's sports. So it's like looking at the effects of sexism and gender on how that plays out. And what made me think of it is when you were talking about the lesbians, who you named the lesbian coaches as the people who sort of were the least supportive of you coming out. And I think we could also add to that, there is only one Division I women's basketball coach in the entire country who's publicly out. And I think that's a shocking statistic, because I think we all know that there are more lesbians coaching basketball. But there's only one who is publicly out, and that's Sherry Morrell, who is Kirk's former colleague up at Portland State. So what's up with this? And I don't know why we don't have any lesbians on this panel, but I know a panel that I did at UMASS Lowell about 2 weeks ago. They tried very hard to find a lesbian coach and lesbian athlete to be on the panel, and they talked to them, but they were not willing to be on the panel. They were able to find gay men and straight male allies and straight coaches, but they could not find lesbian athletes and coaches to be on the panel. So what do you think about that? What's up with that?
Specifically on this topic, it's something that hits me very hard. Obviously, I'm a male, but I've coached women's athletics for 35 years of my life, so it's been a big part of my life. I find it amazing because female athletes, if they were in athletics 30 years ago, you were assumed lesbian, let's just face it. And I'm not saying anything that any female that's been involved in sport is assumed. You're assumed lesbian if you like sports or you're in sports. And yet, that group, through the last 40 years, have found their compartmentalization and their ability to say, I'm comfortable there, and yet it's the white elephant or pink elephant in the room. Everyone knows that, oh, you're 45 and you don't have a male partner and you don't have kids. Oh, she's gay.
And you have a roommate.
Right, and
You have a roommate.
And this woman that
so
shows
we
up
don't
to all
talk
the
about
games.
it. So we just don't talk about it. And the thing that I think is the most devastating to me is the effect on the female student athlete, because we are reciprocating that, oh, you can be involved in athletics and be lesbian, but you can't be out about it. You can't be public about it. Therefore, I think there's a lot of females that are growing up now who are very comfortable in who their identity is going to be. And I don't want to be in the closet. I don't want to be compartmentalized. Therefore, I'm not going into coaching. So I think that it's a very powerful message as a leader that we have more females stepping up to be in that role. Everyone already kind of assumes and knows in the departments or wherever they are. And I don't know how to bridge that gap, and I fight that fight every day. That being said, there are some amazing supportive lesbians that are coaching that have been supportive in softball for me. But the ones that have been the most resistant have been those that don't want to rock the boat. And I'm sitting there saying, everyone you've ever recruited and anyone that's ever played for you knows that you're gay. Nobody cares. Your AD doesn't care. If they cared, you wouldn't be on staff. You know, you've been there for 30 years, you're in the Hall of Fame, you've won more games than, most people in the sport. Why is this a problem? Because your female athletes know, and yet you don't say, and you compartmentalize. You don't bring your partner on a road trip. You don't talk about your kids. They're not at those events. Sending a message to our female athletes that you can be gay, but don't be out. And I think that's a tough one.
I think also with the integrity of the other coaches. I mean, really with coaching with high caliber, especially in bowl championship schools, if you come out, it'll be used against you in recruiting because of the integrity of the other people around you. And if that's a tough one. Like, I'd love to say that, in our Pac-12 that, that's not used against other Pac-12 when, like, they're recruiting women's basketball. We have a Pac-12 women's basketball coaches that all sit around and play nice, but when they're going after the big ones, don't you think that you don't want to go there because, their partner's sitting right next to them on the bench, and she's gay. Maybe it doesn't resonate so much with the kid, but the parents sometimes have that they're still in that.
And this is where I go to. It doesn't add up because that kid that goes there already knows that coach is gay. Mm-hmm. The parents know the coach is gay, and that they're fooling themselves if they don't realize that. Because another person might say what they already know. You're going to lose that kid anyway if the parents have a problem with it. And this is what I'm saying. It's that pink elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. There's no avenue for negative recruiting that issue because everyone knows. There's no big secret. And at 99% of those situations. And it's hard for me, obviously, because I'm a male coaching female, but I am very passionate about this because I knew who the lesbian coaches were 30 years ago when I was coaching softball. No one cared. All the big recruits still went there. They all knew. All their parents knew. No one just talked about it. Mm-hmm. So if another coach said, oh, don't go there because she's gay, there's like, go on there because she wins. I know she's gay. Why are you trying to tell me? That was 30 years ago.
Might be the problem if they lose, though.
Well,
Say again, Lonnie.
Well, it might be the problem if they lose. So my dissertation was on minority coaches within athletics. And so one of the things I did was interview lesbian coaches who encountered this problem. And to me, it was striking that there would be a coach, I won't name the school, who had an interview, was going through the salary negotiation. After she left the AD, he walked her out. Partner drove up to pick her up, and the AD's like, who is that? She did the whole, it's my friend type of thing. The AD's like, okay, I'll call you later. She's like, oh, that's strange. Calls her later, a couple days later, and said, we're going to keep this open for this position. We'll let you know if we're still interested. And she had just gone through the salary negotiation part. Like, what do you mean if I'm still interested? And said, you know what? Don't worry about it. I'm no longer interested. Oh, sorry. Before she went into the car, he was like, I just want to let you know that I'm a Christian man, and we have Christian values at the school. And she's like, well, I'm also a Christian, and I'm not really sure what you're getting at, but that's not going to be a problem for me. And then at the phone call, it was like, you know what, you can take the position. I no longer want to be here. And decided at that point she needs to be at a school that's accepting, that she needs to be out, she needs to be open. And again and again and again, all the coaches who I interviewed said that them being out and open at their school was the best decision, not only for them, but for their student athletes. That it was absolutely needed, but you also need to make sure that you're putting yourself in the environment where you can do that.
Absolutely.
And so it takes a lot of work to get to that point where you can find the place where you can be open, where you can share your family, that you can have pictures. Like, I feel like coaching, it's huge to have pictures of your family up, that the students know who you are, that you're not hiding things, to be that role model for student athletes. But I think it's a lot harder for coaches who are coming from a place where their peers don't even know what the term homosexuality is, to kind of break through that mold. One of the reasons why I didn't get into coaching was because I didn't want to hide who I was.
Absolutely.
And so I went into sports psych. A lot of my friends now who coach at different places, they're extremely open. And I do wonder if I missed out on an opportunity to coach because I was scared about being able to be who I am, but I love my job and wouldn't change anything in the world.
You're in your job. You're doing fantastic.
But I do agree that for both the student athletes and for the coaches, like, peace of mind, that being open and being out and not being afraid, but also making sure that you're in the environment that you can do that, because as soon as you lose, if the coach can find a reason or the AD can find a reason while your recruiting numbers are down, or you don't seem to bring in that could be held against them. Hopefully that's dwindling, but
Absolutely.
you need both.
I agree.
Great discussion. But I just, my 2 cents worth is I think that fear of negative recruiting, whether it's a reality or not, and it still is a reality in different parts of the country, it's a huge reality. That is the biggest thing that separates, I think, how gay men in sport and lesbians in sport experience homophobia. Is that fear of losing your livelihood because you lost, you can't get the recruit you need, or fear of leaving yourself open to discrimination if things go bad. So it's
the interesting counterpoint on that on the male side. Obviously, females were assumed gay when they go into sport. Conversely, is it true? So males are assumed straight when they're in sport, and so they're coming from two totally different perspectives. One's assumed gay, one's assumed straight, and yet we still have the same fear issues coming into play. So I think it's a really interesting dynamic. We're saying they're coming from two different perspectives, but yet the fear of homophobia is the internal, much more so than the external, and yet it's perceived. As we all know in the coming out process, most of our internal fears are never realized.
And I would also say that depending on the place you are, the fears are absolutely justified, and I think it's important to note that. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about how from your perspective, the dynamics of homophobia in athletics is affected by being a person of color?
Yeah, I would go back to a little bit of the research that I've done when I interviewed women of color who also identified as gay. What they found was that they did get, there were more rates of homophobia than racism. And so actually kind of speaking to what you were saying, so there was someone who was about my age who was told by her head coach, she was an assistant coach, was told by her head coach who identified as lesbian that she could not be out. That she could not be out to the players, that she could not be out in the athletic department, and that she had to keep that part hidden. And so incidences of that kind of flared up where they were told by people who also identified as lesbian to be quiet about their identity. People who identified as black said that racism, overt racism, wasn't as apparent. The only form of racism that they really encountered was that, and these were women basketball players that I interviewed, was that at times being black was seen as an asset because you can recruit, like you can get all of our black players in. But then if the team already had one black assistant coach, well, we already have someone who's black, so we don't really need you for any skill set other than recruiting. So that was maybe the racism that they experienced. I think for me personally, I think it's where I went to school, Northeastern's pretty similar to USC, and not academics, but where it's located in a kind of urban place. And I think I was fortunate that my basketball team, within the context of our league, was known as the black team, even though our coach was white. So my experience, and even growing up in racism, growing up in Massachusetts, was never overt. It was very underlying, very conforming, kind of. When I think of racism or my racial identity, I think of elementary school when some little punk 6-year-old called me the N-word or something. But my biggest difficulties has always been around sexual orientation and being comfortable with my identity, the tie between religion and my identity, and being able to balance that. Being able to talk to my teammates, or I came out pretty late. I was probably 21 or 22 when I finally was open about my sexual orientation. But again, my teammates were extremely supportive. There were maybe 1 or 2 shower incidences where it was squashed, it was talked about, stopped being immature. So I don't know. I think, of course, there's all these different intersections that play with gender and race and sexual orientation. But to me, the biggest thing that has stuck out, and this could be different for anyone else, is sexual orientation and my own internal comfort in being who I am. I feel like I want to say more about it, but I can't find the words right now.
It's interesting. I think there's an interesting, and not to tease the panel for tomorrow, there's actually several on the panel tomorrow that will have that intersect, that are athletes. So that'll be interesting tomorrow to talk about that maybe specifically. I think the intersect of religion and homosexuality probably is much more common of a discussion, especially within sport. The whole statement of, well, I'm a Christian, so that's supposed to have mean something. Yeah. And the reality is that that's an interesting construct right now that I think is very powerful right now, not only in athletics, but across the country.
Well, let's go there, because that was one of the other things I wanted to talk about, is the, when the intersection, and particularly evangelical Christianity, there are a number of large sport ministries that have very, very much integrated themselves into sport at all levels, whether we're talking about high school, college, or the pros. So Fellowship of Christian Athletes, Athletes in Action, the Baseball Chapel, to name 3, whose, as a sport ministry, their purpose is to evangelize in sport, use sport as a vehicle for bringing people to Christ. And there are many coaches at the college level who affiliate with one or more of those organizations, and athletes who affiliate with those organizations. And so the question is, what's the best way to create a team climate when you have evangelical Christians or other conservative Christian viewpoints that do not accept homosexuality, and openly LGBT players on the team, or the coach is evangelical? How do you create a climate where everybody on that team can bring all of who they are to the team and treat each other respectfully?
One of the interesting things that this has been very, real for me in the last 4 years, was even while I was at Oregon State and then when I got back to UCLA, I think anytime you start talking about religion and those groups and just saying Christianity, we in the LGBT community are just as guilty of assuming that because someone says they're Christian that they're going to be homophobic. So I have to say that we're probably just as guilty, if not as guilty, as assuming everybody that is Christian is going to react as the homophobe that is Christian and using Christianity to be anti-LGBT. Because what I have found is that at both institutions, the FCA individual or the other individual that was Athletes in Action individually reached out to me to help them reach out to LGBT people. Now, that was an individual. It wasn't the organization. It was the individual at that campus because they knew who I was, they knew what I stood for and what I was about, and they felt very comfortable saying, this is a person that can help me do what I want, which is bring more people to Christ or be in their awareness. So I once again go down to breaking down barriers about individual people and not assuming that a title or that a group automatically means that everyone is going to fall into a certain category. And that, to me, happens on both sides. The LGBT side, assuming that Christians mean homophobic, and the reverse. But it's about breaking down those barriers because it's a very, very powerful wall that's been created by both sides. That's my only experience with it thus far.
I think my team in particular, we kind of have that mix between a bunch of LGBT athletes with those who are very religious. Personally, I have a really good friend who's very Christian, and one of the things that she always tells me is, she's like, I may not be 100% on LGBT issues, but you know what? God says, do not judge others, and that's how I view you, and I love you, and we're great friends. I think that religion prevents people from coming out in their sport, which I think is a whole nother issue that we could get into. But I think for the most part, on my team specifically, I can't speak for others, but we're a pretty understanding group, and I think that everyone kind of, is a good person.
Did you know that about Dave Salo was that something part of the whole recruiting process with Dave?
Yeah, I think that my recruiting process was totally different. I actually came out to every coach that recruited me while I was in high school. And I actually had a coach who actually came out to me after I came out to him. So
Good job. Good job.
Yeah,
There you go.
so
Supposed to go the other way, but that's a good job. Right? That's great.
So yeah, I don't think I had any negative recruiting, but I don't think that there was any. I don't think Dave was never like, oh, well, this is a really religious university. I got recruited by Notre Dame, and I told him to go scratch. But I think that everything, all the coaches that I talked to, even the ones at Auburn, were like, we are open, we are accepting. We don't really care who you want to date or marry. We're more concerned about how fast you can swim between two walls. So that was more of their concern rather than the fact that I'm gay.
Anyone else? Okay.
Let's hear from the audience.
Okay, I just want to ask one more question, though, and that is, we don't have a transgender panelist here, and I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about how UCLA and SU are accommodating students who identify as transgender who want to play on a sports team.
Right now, it's a very tough topic right now, and it's a very vague topic, and I don't know that we've done enough to even really explore it to know where we are able to create a resource. So it's, as you know, it's a very powerful topic right now across the country at K through 12 all the way up to the Olympic level. But I can honestly say that it's not one that we've done a great job of tackling as of yet.
Yeah, I think it's being tackled a lot on the Division III level. I think that's where, with Karen Morrison and everything that she's doing with the NC2A, which is great. I think we need to take a harder look at it in Division I. We really, with our committee that we have, I think that's going to be one of the topics that we have to tackle, is transgender.
And clearly, I think Division I and high-level international competition are very much in the same place as even the USOC and the IOC are trying to figure out, at what point with hormone therapy and where you're at and how long, all those kind of issues come into play. And I think I would say that Division I is kind of waiting to see where the international is coming out with.
Well, the IOC has a policy. It's not a great one,
Right.
but they have a policy and have had one for almost 10 years. And the NCAA does have some very specific policy recommendations. So I'm going to tweak both UCLA and SC to take a look at that, because the transgender athletes are coming. If they're not already here, you probably lost several because there was no policy. They didn't want to be the pioneer. But you know, young people are identifying as trans earlier and earlier, and some of them want to play sports. And so they're coming through the high school systems. So, you know, there are about 12 state high school associations now that have adopted policies, and it's happening faster and faster. So I just want to encourage you to take a look at the NCAA recommendations.
And even with some of the recommendations, though, there's been some backlash because the way that not how they define a man or a woman, but that there's a lot of leeway if you're F to M in terms of just being able to jump on a men's team, and it's not a problem. Even if you're not even doing hormones, like if you just identify as a man, you can go ahead and try out. But if you're M to F, thank you. I think it's a year-long process of taking hormones, and there's this theory that, you know, if you're born a male, that you get this head start if you go through puberty, but what about if you're only 5'8" and puberty didn't really, you know? And so even with the policies that are in place, I think there's going to need to be a lot more work, both Division I and everywhere else, to make sure that, I don't know if you can do a uniform policy that individually it's going to look very different for people. But I think you're right. I think there's a floodgate coming.
Yep. And a lot of research went into developing the recommendations, consulting with doctors who work with transgender people, and so on. So, you know, I just want to leave you with that thought. Okay, we'd love to hear some questions or comments from you folks to the panel.
So, Donna and Lonnie, you both spoke really poignantly about sort of generational differences in culture, awareness, and support for LGBT athletes. And that's certainly consistent with my experience in intercollegiate sports in the 90s. It's a very, very different world now than when I went to college. I would imagine there are a lot of former athletes out there who continue to deal with issues in their lives with respect to the lack of support or the lack of awareness that they experience during their experience in college sports. And I wonder if you have heard of or otherwise know of efforts to reach out to those people and provide that support now that we're a little bit more enlightened.
Well, I think right now we're in I think that is a great, you know, programming to attack. Right now we are, you know, we're celebrating our 125th as far as our anniversary year. So we're making a huge push regarding our alumni on all of our different teams, including teams that we do not have anymore, such as gymnastics and things like that. And I think that's part of, you know, when we get all of those names back, we're going to look at, you know, what can we do in order to for outreach of those alumni that maybe we haven't been able to do in the past. So as far as inviting them back onto campus. So that would probably be one of those things that we would kind of toss around and put into a hat as far as, you know, support that we can give them as alumni.
Ironically, interesting, at UCLA, so we did our symposium in April, and I know that we had several alumni, one of them in football, quite a while ago, that reopened up doors financially with the athletic department that had shut those down previously because of that. And we had another one that was still remained anonymous, but on the same lines was creating, feeling like what we were doing was creating an opportunity that didn't exist, and we're very supportive. We've also been very fortunate to have some very big pro athletes that were allies from UCLA, both Chris Cluey and Brendan Ayabadeo, and that's also been very powerful for the work we've been doing. I do think the financial gain for an athletic department, when you talk about alumni, I think it is astounding about what could start happening when you start talking about opening up the door with LGBT because we know those athletes have gone through their experience and graduated now in the workforce. And to possibly see the welcome back identifying as LGBT could be extremely powerful and lucrative for an athletic department. Not that it should be financially, but I think there's a great potential there.
And even for the people who don't agree, that to see the culture change nationally, that you wouldn't, I think people would maybe have a concern that there would be a shift of people who would now withhold, but just the change, and that typically I think athletic departments, when you think of conservative and liberal, are a little bit kind of toward the military side of, you know, of conservativeness, but that to see the national change happening, that you'll be getting both still.
Yeah. Great
Yes,
question.
in the back.
In sport, you know, we're always told that we're a little bit behind the rest of the world in terms of our LGBT politics and everything. I think probably I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I assume everybody would agree that if it weren't for a broader kind of political movement about, you know, queer rights, lesbian gay rights, and so on, that a lot of the discussions we're having right now, the recent very quick changes over a very short period of time. I wonder what you think the specificity of, like, sport as its own kind of special thing. What can we give back to the broader movement? I mean, here we are, like, riding on the coattails of the broader movement, and finally, in 2013, making some changes. What can we give back to that movement? What can we contribute that's something specific from sport? Like, these changes are happening at all different institutional locations, so what can sport do?
My personal opinion on that, I think, is very powerful, and I go directly to the you can play connection, because I think sport has always been about literally getting on a playing field and competing on a level playing field. Here's the rules for you, here's the rules for me, they're the same rules, and you compete, and whoever wins, wins. So it broke down racial barriers. I think for us to be able to for sport to give back is to say, if you can play, you can play. And I think in the power of that, I think in that social change, I think is tremendous. And that's the way that sport can truly give back. If sport is truly about level playing field and compete, and owns that, what's always been sportsmanship, and has always owned that, then truly they can be the example to the rest of the country on this movement to say, it can come and jump into sport, and it has no problem, because it's about competing on a level playing field. So I think that's the type of way that I think sport can give back to the movement. By truly owning what they've always been about, which is playing on a level playing field.
I think they can because of the platform that they're on, especially with media and endorsement. I think that's the way that we could give back to the broader movement, is using that spotlight and that focal point of, we're in the entertainment business, really, sport, and using that platform to help with the greater cause.
Very specifically for collegiate athletics, I think that a great community service SAC project for every college and university in the country would be to train ally and LGBT athletes to go into local schools and talk about anti-bullying efforts. I think that young people in K through 12 schools would hear that message more powerfully and coaches too, from for UCLA, USC, to go to all the surrounding schools in LA, and hear from athletes who compete at the schools and the coaches. I think that would be a huge way for sports to give back in terms of an issue that needs help desperately, is addressing anti-bullying and bullycides and all awful stuff that's happening in K through 12 schools.
And I also want to acknowledge Nike on this front, because Nike has stepped up, owning that, saying that sport is about creating a level playing field and about social change and social justice. And Nike has done a great job of owning that, specifically with the Be True campaign, but also with saying we want to have the first out pro athlete. We want that person. We're seeking that person. When that person's ready to come out, we're ready to jump on. If they're not one of our athletes, they will be one of our athletes.
They already have that. Brittany Griner.
Right. Male athletes.
Just
sorry.
making a point.
Yes, but they're actively, and they've done that, and they backed it up by creating a clothing line specifically for her, that was based on her identity. So I think that's another way that sport and the entertainment world can be giving back. and they're not the last one to do it. So,
Other comments or questions? I think you were, and then you.
I have a question. I'm writing my dissertation on trans athletes in collegiate and elite sports spaces, and I'm curious. Someone made the statement that these issues are somehow easier, or there are factors that make it easier in D3 or D2 less elite competitive spaces. I was wondering if the panel might address what factors make it more challenging when you get to an elite level, to D1 or international competition. What about those spaces?
competitive advantage. Competitive advantage.
I just,
Competitive what?
Competitive advantage.
Well, fear.
The fear. Yeah,
Fear
well,
of
that's the
competitive
factor, is
advantage.
the competitive advantage. For a male competing in tennis or swimming against females.
Well, no, for a transgender woman competing against
Yes.
women.
Thank you. So that the fear of the competitive
That's
advantage.
what you said is what the fear is.
Yes.
just to clarify, I think that, with Division III, they're dealing with it more. It's not, if I used the word easier, I misspoke. I think they're dealing with it. Okay. Okay.
Just for fun.
It's, yeah, you said it's being dealt with much more at the Division III. Yeah,
And it's interesting, though, because I've tried to get some information, data from the NCAA about how many schools are adopting, at all levels, D1, 2, or 3. They don't have any information about that. So it's like, well, how would we get that? We would have to do a national survey, maybe go through the conferences to find out, but we really don't know. I think, I tend to agree with you that, but I think it's about money and, what's at stake, what people feel is at stake, not largely about money. At D1 level. I'm sorry, this gentleman was next.
I'm wondering what the differences would be for coaching male athletes or female athletes for a gay male coach.
Well, obviously, I kind of made a joke about it that I'm obviously safer as a gay male coaching females, but I think the reality is, in seriousness, is that what you look for, or what I can do as a college coach for my student athlete, male or female, is to create an environment where they can grow and excel and leave that university a better athlete, a better person, and better prepared to be successful in the real world. And the real world consists of more than just what happens between the white lines or what happens on the court. So I think the pressures or the challenges with that are that you can continue to teach and train your athletes to be successful without it having to be about an agenda that's going to talk about LGBT topics. I got asked by a TV show that was filming a project and said, how has your coaching changed? How do you coach your athletes differently now that you're out? And I said, it's no different. I said, I talked about diversity before I came out. I talked about the ability for us as a group to accept each other and our diverse issues. I don't talk about gay issues more now than I did then. I talk about diversity, acceptance, and inclusion in general. And I can continue to do that. Ironically, being the head coach, most of your athletes don't run to your head coach to talk about personal issues. They go to the assistant. So being a head coach, I was actually floored when they said, well, how did you have a conversation about the gay athlete that's on your team? And I went, I've got a gay athlete on my team. And I literally said it on camera. And they said, yeah, her right over there. We just interviewed her. And she said, I'm like, I had no idea. And I said, the issue is I would hope that I would have created an environment as a coach that would make it be accepting from the top down, that we're accepting a diversity. And I think that's the same thing in our male sport. I'm not going to talk about what it means to be gay to my athletes. That's not really appropriate conversation if I'm coaching males or females. What I am appropriate to talk about, or what it is appropriate to talk about, is how we as a group accept each other, work together, we work through our differences, we actually respect and appreciate the diversity within our team. Because if we were all the same, we will all hit the same roadblock, we'll all react the same, and we'll fail. We're only stronger as a team when we are more diverse in all of our personalities, in our traits, in what we bring to the team. So I think that should be the same for any coach talking to any athlete. It's not about talking about sexual issues. That's not my place as a coach to talk about sexuality. My place is to talk about diversity.
One more question? Did you?
A lot of times we talk about sport being behind the rest of the world in sort of LGBTQ issues, but I think that it's as like a smaller section of the larger university. It is, I mean, it can be a bit safer because you are focused on competing and getting the best players you can, and you're all working towards a larger goal for the sport. But how do you sort of navigate the larger community outside of sports? Because you are student athletes, so you're athletes, but outside of that, you still go to USC, you still have to deal with things that maybe your team can't protect you from, or the rest of the institution can't protect you from. What do you think there's to do in sort of addressing bigger issues, like USC as a whole, rather than just USC athletic department? Because I know that USC is still pretty conservative and traditional, even though I think that I can't speak for everyone, but it can be a safer place within the athletic community.
Great question.
I think it basically, you just have to be really secure with yourself. I think that it takes a really strong person to be able to go out and be out on the field, but it also takes a really strong and secure person to go out and get involved in the Greek community and get involved in your classes and your studies. We are student athletes here, and student comes first, sometimes.
Outside of practice.
Yeah, so I think it basically comes down that you have a great support group, and I think that the athletic department here provides great support, and it's fantastic. I've gotten support from everyone within the athletic department, but I've also gotten support from professors and mentors outside of athletics. It's just something that it's a whole nother side of you that you need to cultivate, and because we're in such an urban environment here in Los Angeles, I think it's a little bit easier than per se other schools, maybe in the South or in the middle of
Auburn.
Farm, Auburn. But I think it comes down to how secure you are with yourself and being able to put yourself out there and just, not care what people think about you. You got to be a little bit more concerned about your character and how that is portrayed rather than how your sexuality is portrayed.
I think it's really interesting. That's a great question, because I have always been a proponent of that thought process, which is actually, I think sports aren't as far behind internally in the team environment as it's perceived to be or expected to be. I think our teammates, and this goes to when we all raised our hands in that symposium that we did, everyone in there has played with a gay athlete, but have they had a conversation about it? No. I think a team is actually a much safer environment than people outside of it think it will be, because you come together with diverse backgrounds, ethnic, racial, financial, economic, and I think there is a family unit that gets created in a team environment, which is potentially a safe place. It's also a scary place to potentially lose, and that's the fear. So that's why it's unspoken. So everyone kind of knows the gay athlete on the team, they're all part of us, but we don't talk about it. So I think that's where the intersect is interesting, because I think it is a safer environment than all of campus where you don't have a family. You know what I'm saying? But it's perceived as being, it's going to be homophobic.
Yeah,
So it's an interesting construct.
I think for us as administration, we look to support as much as possible our student athletes that do identify as gay and lesbian, in order to create that kind of almost confidence in them and being accepted around in every different area, whether it's not only with their own team but with other teams in the little microcosm. And then also we always push to go outside of that. I mean, I think before, with the past administration, it was all intrinsic. We don't need anybody. Everybody else
And
can.
no one needs to know what we're doing.
And nobody needs to know what we're doing. Now we're wanting our students, athletes, to move outside of that. So we can create the safe haven inside, so they can kind of test their wings a little bit and feel confident in that, and then kind of move that on to the bigger university landscape. And then also for us, continue to do joint programs with university departments that support gay and lesbians also for programming issues.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for coming, and I just want to leave you with my favorite quote from Martina Navratilova, who I realize some of you don't even know who is anymore, which is very sad. She was a great tennis player, but she was talking about basketball in this quote, but to me it's the ideal of the way it should be at some point, and that is when it's the last 3 seconds of the game and the score is tied, you don't care if your teammate is black or white, gay or straight, Jew or Christian. You just want her to make the shot. And that's the way it should be. And we're not there yet, but we certainly have made some huge strides toward that day in the last several years. And I want to leave you with the thought that whether you're an athlete or a sports fan, or you're going to be a parent, or you are a parent, or whatever, you have something that you can do to move this agenda forward in terms of really making sure that not only sports, but the world is a place that we all can be included and respected regardless of our sexual orientations and gender identities. Thank you to a great panel. You all were fabulous.